Hi, it's Sunday at noon. Most of us should be with our families having lunch. So I completely understand the energy is a little limited. But I think we have something for you today that is going to make you think differently. Not the Apple way, in a different way, a local way. What I'm going to start off with is a very, very short 4-minute video that is very cheesy, but shows you a little preview of what I did roughly 12 months ago with my team. And then we're going to go from that video into what it is that I used to do, what it is that I do now, and how that has a lot to do with Bulgaria, the startup ecosystem, and what can be achieved. So just to backtrack a little, my name is Karam. I'm the founder of Sequence. I'm the co-founder of Alice. I just flew in from Athens. Prior to that, I was in Sofia. Prior to that, I was in Lebanon. And before that, I was running around. Why? Because I believe in local ecosystems. And I'm here to talk to you about acceleration in emerging startup markets. So, what's interesting about that video is that what you saw was 5 guys that are most likely your age or younger, and a team that is surely younger than most of the population here, who put together something truly extraordinary. Now, we're not going to get into exactly what it is before I go into the next few slides, but try to remember what you saw, how cheesy that was, how young the people looked, what the environment looked like, and what the feeling you got from that video is. And then use that to put what we're going to talk about in perspective. So, my business is managing risk. What does that mean? It means there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of obstacles, there are a lot of challenges, there are lots of different players involved, and I make sure that everything flows very smoothly. Now, imagine you're managing risk in Lebanon, okay? So, not only am I managing risk as in I'm bringing people together, but I'm bringing people together in one of the most risky environments on the planet, okay? If you don't know where Lebanon is, I don't know what to tell you. Lebanon is in the Middle East, has been through numerous wars, invasions, and has just about been destroyed more than enough times to even, count. Our civil war ended in 1991, 15 years, completely destroyed the country. Then we had a few problems with our neighbors. Okay, we tend to solve these by destroying our own country. And now we're relatively peaceful up until a couple of years ago, when the Syrian war started. And when the Syrian war started, we ended up in a bit of a problem because Syria is Lebanon's big brother, and when the big brother is angry, they generally beat the shit out of the small brother. So it kind of spilled over, okay? We've had a bit of a rough time, as you may have seen in that video. While some people were working, other people were burning tires, other people were getting kidnapped, and this was all happening within a radius of, I'd say, 50 kilometers, okay? So, let's go to the next one. I manage risk in the riskiest country with potentially the riskiest type of businesses, okay? I mean, what is acceleration? It's taking a bunch of concepts at best. Usually it's some young people who are very passionate, helping them develop their idea before they start building it, giving them money, and then hoping that with enough luck, because really it's a lot about luck, you're going to get one of those investments that's going to return a multiple that's going to pay off for everything 7 years down the line. So I don't know what you know about acceleration, but acceleration is perhaps the riskiest type of work you can do because there's no immediate return. It's all long term, and you are basing all of that on a gut feeling. I like this guy. I think in 7 years he's going to make a lot of money. I mean, I don't know. It's easier to make money in a casino than in an accelerator. So you combine the three, and you have, excuse the language, a clusterfuck. Okay, you have the most difficult possible situation you could possibly create in a country that has no standing government, that is currently every other month seeing either a car bombing or a suicide bombing, that has no security almost whatsoever. And we're trying to create internet startups. What the fuck? Okay. In 12 months, this was 2012, we created 8 companies from pre-idea. The people barely even had an idea. They didn't even have teams. And within these 12 months, we accelerated them to 3 of them becoming $1 million plus valuations each. And they're still in Lebanon. Okay. So that begs the question, if this guy did it with these bunch of kids that I just saw in the video, okay, and luck was not on their side, the government was not on their side, the region was not on their side, okay, you can even introduce God if that's what you're into, okay, and we ended up with an actual successful cycle. These people got funded by local angels and VCs to be valued at these values. We're not just throwing these numbers out. So, what does that mean? That means that in the worst kind of environment, you can actually create an opportunity for those who are locally present. So we did that, and I think we inspired a few people, because within 3 months of finishing the cycle, we inspired the Central Bank of Lebanon to create a sovereign fund of $400 million for investment in startups. So within that 12 months that we're talking about, which honestly, it's like been the worst year I can possibly imagine for Lebanon, we managed to inspire the only still functioning government institution, okay, to put together $400 million for investment in startups in Lebanon. Okay, I don't take credit for doing it because the governor is by far, you know, it's his word, it's his decision. But the fact that we showed that there is an opportunity and that there are potential entrepreneurs and startups to invest in inspired him to create potential follow-on funding on the seed, early growth and potential exit stages. This $400 million is accessible in its entirety in 1 year. So you can, if they can find the opportunities, they can invest $400 million in 1 year. And we're talking about a country that's almost half the size of your country. Our GDP is $30 billion, okay? So, okay, that's all cool. But what does that mean? That means that you can actually create local ecosystems no matter how difficult the situation is. And why? Well, I think what inspired the governor of the central bank and what inspired the people, the entrepreneurs we were working with, to succeed and push much harder than is humanly possible, is that we explained to them that it's okay to get uncomfortable. What does that mean? That means when you sit down, the chair is very comfortable, the remote is in your hand, okay, and the bowl of chips is on the table at an arm's length, you're not going to make much of an effort to change things. You're not going to make much of an effort to try and fix or improve what you have because you're already very comfortable. Which is one of the problems I have, and I think there was this kid, 12-year-old kid who was on the stage, I think that was him or maybe one of the other guys, who mentioned something very cool. He's like, something along the lines of, I want people to start living because we're all alive, but it doesn't mean we're living. And I think what he meant by that, the whole 7 p.m. thing and people go home, is that to truly be living, okay, you have to get uncomfortable. You have to get into this place where you're not just vegetating through life waiting for heaven or hell, whichever you believe in. You're actually doing your heaven and your hell on this planet while you're still alive in that short time that you have by the force that you have within your capacity. So when you get uncomfortable, and sometimes it's a personal thing, which is rare, but it does happen, or when the environment around you forces you to get uncomfortable. I don't know what the situation is like in Bulgaria, but yesterday I was speaking at TEDx Athens, and it was a crowd of 3,000 people. And Athens and Greece is going through maybe the biggest financial crisis in their known history. And they made me feel, in that 24 hours I was there, that the crisis for them was an opportunity. That this discomfort that they were feeling, okay, that they were experiencing, the oh my God, the country's falling apart, I don't have a job, I can't get a job, there's anarchy everywhere. All that they are feeling is an opportunity, okay, not an obstacle to getting stuff done. So why do I say get uncomfortable? Because what made us do this acceleration program in the least likely place you would do an acceleration program is we actually stood up in front of, we invited just about every important person in the startup and investment ecosystem in Lebanon, put them in a room, it was maybe 30 people. And we told them we were going to create 8 companies with X amount of dollars and X amount of time before we had even thought about how we could do that or whether it was possible. So we made sure that the top people in the country knew what we were going to do before we had figured out what we were going to do. Why? Because that was the only way we could get so uncomfortable that we would deliver. That was the only way where, okay, if we don't do this, everybody who is anybody in this country is going to think we're total idiots. So I brought them in, I put them there, and I told them, guys, we're going to do this. And they all looked at us and said, like, this is impossible. One guy was like, what's in it for you? And I'm like, I'm doing this for the glory. But it was all just so that they would be there to be the witness that would say down the line, these guys were complete idiots, they failed, they should not be respected in the community anymore. Because when you become that person that has to do it to survive or leave the country, then it puts you in a very uncomfortable place. And when you become uncomfortable, you force yourself to make it work. So, okay, so we got uncomfortable, everything was nice and dandy, I wasn't sleeping, none of us were sleeping. As you may have noticed, we were all falling asleep at the office. And we had a problem in that getting uncomfortable is fine, but managing the risk of that discomfort is something that is necessary for you to be able to get to the end goal. Because it's okay to get uncomfortable. It's not okay to burn out after 1 month. It's not okay to say, I'm going to aim for the stars and really do a very, very good job, and then all of a sudden find yourself completely incapable of managing that risk. So in those 12 months that we were accelerating these startups and so on, I made every possible mistake in the book. Okay? It was the first accelerator in Lebanon, the first that I had run, and my first real in-depth experience with an accelerator. That experience, those mistakes forced me and my team and the partners and everyone to basically spend on average 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, over 6 months to accelerate the startups, 6 months to prepare for the acceleration, and 6 months to do the follow-on for the funding. So basically, we spent the last 18 months, okay, I haven't earned a single penny in the last 18 months, okay, working for someone else that is younger than us, that we have invested in, So I find the guy, he's a cool potential entrepreneur. I give him money, I help him develop his idea, I provide him with the space, I provide him with the connections, or her, okay? And I basically spent every ounce and gram of energy that I had to manage the risk that I had created with my absurd statement that we're going to make this work. And unfortunately, that's not sustainable. Why isn't it sustainable? Well, let's put it this way. In a conference in Vancouver where accelerators came together, everyone except Y Combinator, because the king never leaves the palace. We were all sitting there, and I looked at 500 startups, or a very successful accelerator. I looked at Techstars, and we're like, so who's making money in this room? And it was like dead silence. Nobody in the acceleration market is making money. We all thought, okay, great, we'll get some funds, the cost won't be that high, we'll have limited human resources because these are entrepreneurs, they can take care of themselves. And in 2 to 3 years, we'll have a massive exit and it will all pay off. So accelerators today actually have a forecast on return on their investment of 7 years. So I don't know what you know about 7 years, but it's a long time. Like you can have kids and stuff in 7 years. So accelerators are, by their very nature, not profitable, and they tend to not function without a mothership that's funding them and seeding them. So how do we fix that problem? Because if we're going to wait for the mothership, then the local ecosystems are simply not going to make it. Because if you're going to wait for an investor to come in and say, I'm going to put in a $2 billion VC fund and create an accelerator from that fund that's going to help the Bulgarian market, we can wait for 2050 and it most likely won't happen. Okay? So how do we create that local ecosystem opportunity without having to go for that impossible scenario of finding a VC to move in? Okay, so what we did in Lebanon was very interesting. I believe the fact that we were able to do it in Lebanon was extraordinary. I don't think I would ever do it again, especially not in the way we did it. It was just impossible. So why am I here telling you we have to accelerate startups in emerging startup markets? Why do I still believe in that? Well, I believe in that for 2 reasons. One, I'm Lebanese, and I need a good reason to stay in Lebanon. And the guys who were on stage said, yeah, I want to stay in Bulgaria, but all of them had this hesitation of, if I find something to do. Okay? I don't want to be working in a bank. I don't want to be bored out of my wits. Okay? So I want to do something that's actually exciting. But if every good opportunity is shipped out to London or shipped out to the Valley, the minute it starts being noticeable, how can you create a local ecosystem? I mean, if every good guy is now sitting in Palo Alto in an air-conditioned, modern environment where they're completely disconnected from reality, how does that help Bulgaria? How does that help Lebanon? Okay, it helps in that we can talk about him when we do speeches, but that's about it. Okay. So it doesn't help, which means that we need to create opportunities that are persistent, that keep people around. But how do you keep people around if there's no funding? How do you keep people around if there's no opportunity for a startup to grow? How do you keep people around if the ecosystem doesn't exist? If the local ecosystem doesn't exist? And this is where it gets very interesting. I'm going to ask, this is a rhetorical question. How many Maseratis and Mercedes and Range Rovers do you see on the streets of Bulgaria and downtown Sofia? I was here for 24 hours. I've seen quite a lot. It's absurd. Okay. There are rich people in Bulgaria. Okay. I'm not saying everyone's rich, but there are rich people in Bulgaria. Now, what is an angel investor? An angel investor is a rich person who understands what he is investing in and therefore takes that leap of faith because he gets a positive gut feeling on an investment that doesn't make sense. The guy who's sitting in his Mercedes going from club to club, most likely isn't the perfect example of an angel investor. But what if we could approach that guy or that lady and say, there are some local opportunities. You have $50 million invested in the market, so you already have a decent portfolio. Why don't you invest 1% of that in something that you're willing to write off? So 1% of your 50 million goes into something that maybe will be the next Skype, or maybe will be the next Waze, or maybe will be the next big thing. But if it isn't, the worst case scenario is you'll have a very good time being with people who are very passionate and feeling the energy of life that is within them. So effectively living the life of an entrepreneur vicariously through someone else for a bit of money, which is, they spend more money on their yachts and their cars, so I'm sure they can do that. So every market has potential angel investors. And every market has entrepreneurs, but there's a problem with the whole concept of the entrepreneur. An entrepreneur isn't just someone who works very hard, doesn't shower, and knows how to code. That's not an entrepreneur, okay? An entrepreneur is a lot more than that. An entrepreneur is someone who can figure out what it is that he has and sell it to someone who's willing to buy it. Because if there is no sale, there is no entrepreneurship. There's just geekiness, which I'm fine with. It's okay to be geeks, but it doesn't make money. So on one hand, we have the investors who don't have a clue what they're investing in, so they're not going to do it. On the other hand, we have entrepreneurs who have no clue how to communicate what they have, so they cannot sell it. And I was at Launch Hub 2 days ago, okay, and they're doing this long weekend. Launch Hub is a quasi-accelerator seed fund, and they're doing this long weekend where they select startups to invest in. And the ideas were incredible. They were ultimate geek ideas, like we're going to build this and it's going to do that and so on. But they had no clue how to pitch to investors. You know, like I was sitting there and I was like, dude, what's the size of your market? He's like 300,000. I'm like, okay, and is this a local market? As in, is this 300,000 people in Canada, or is it a global market? He's like, no, it's a global market of 300,000 people. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that potentially around the world you have potentially 300,000 people across 150 different languages and 182 different countries that you could possibly get them to subscribe to your website at $60 a month. That is your market. Wow. You know, I'm very happy for you, but it doesn't make any sense. And the problem is he actually had a really cool product, but he sized the market at 300,000 people and pitching it to an investor, and if the investor can't see through all of that, he's not going to invest. And unfortunately, the investors in these local markets cannot see through that. The investors in these local markets are like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Pulls out the calculator, does the numbers, says, okay, best case scenario, you're going to make $10 million a year. I'm not going to invest. There's never going to be a return on my investment. Which brings us to, how do we bridge that gap? So my latest project, which was born from a few things. First of all, the crisis that Lebanon is going through. Second of all, the really absurd 12 months that I just experienced accelerating startups in Lebanon. And third, the desire to keep people in their home countries. I'm Lebanese. I've been working very hard to stay in Lebanon. My brother and sister are both PhDs from MIT. There's no fucking way they're going to come back. Okay? One is in Oxford doing research on hydrology for the UK Ministry of Water or whatever. The other is doing neuroscience research at Michigan Ann Arbor. I mean, what are they going to come and do in Lebanon? I mean, really. The only thing you could possibly work with is the weapons industry, and we don't have a very good weapons industry. I think our newest plane is maybe 40 years old. But anyway, so how do we bring them back? And I've been thinking a lot about it, and the only way you actually can bring people back is by giving them a way for them to create their own opportunity. Because you can't go to the government and say, okay, we're going to have to create a nuclear industry so that we can bring back the nuclear physicists, and we have to create the hydrology industry. No, it's not going to happen. Lebanon is not a rich country. We need to just give them a way to do it themselves without feeling like they are throwing away those 15 years of education that they've invested in. And so those three reasons made me think of how do we make acceleration in emerging startup markets more effective so that we could create local markets. And I thought a lot about that for a while until one day I started just getting on a plane and traveling. In the last 2 months, I've been to maybe 10 different countries, and I've spoken primarily in the EMEA region. And I've spoken to entrepreneurs in Berlin, in Dublin, in Paris, in London, in Bulgaria, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Dubai, in Lebanon, all over the place. In Istanbul, in Greece yesterday. And I even, and you know, in its most absurd ways, okay, I actually would go around and talk to random people who I felt maybe could inspire me to a next level. And it's my first couple of days in Bulgaria, and I don't know anything except Sofia. I actually don't even remember Sofia as the capital of Bulgaria. I'm now getting to remember it, okay? So it's okay, it's okay. I wasn't very good at where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. But, so I was here and I was thinking, okay, Sofia, so maybe we can do something in Sofia, maybe we can help create an ecosystem here. And I'm waiting to get up on stage, and a young lady comes up to me and gives me this pamphlet, says, you know, this is a startup, and you know, why don't you take a look at it? And I asked her, so what do you do? And she says, I run Startup Blagovrad, okay? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna pronounce this properly, okay? And I'm like, I can't pronounce that, what is that? She's like, well, it's this university town that has a really cool startup ecosystem. And I started thinking, okay, so I mean, even in countries like Lebanon and Bulgaria and the smaller countries, you still have even smaller ecosystems that want to be there, that want to be created, and that don't have potentially the support of the central government and all that stuff. You know, they exist because there's a couple of universities, and how can we seed all of that? So what is Alice? Alice is that tool, and I can't show it to you now, but it will be launched in a couple of days. Alice is that tool that helps startups and investors speak the same language. What does that mean? It means that startups who have no idea how to value their business, who have no idea how to prepare a half-decent financial model, okay, and who have no idea how to present themselves in a consistent way so that they don't scare off the investor. Use Alice to do all of that, and it's all fully automated because we have some pretty crazy artificial intelligence people working on that. On the other hand, you have investors who are always looking for an opportunity, but have no friggin' clue where to start. So a rich person's like, yeah, you know, I would put money, but I don't know who to talk to. And when I talk to them, they send me these 50-page business plans that it's gonna cost me more money to read the business plan than it is to invest in them, okay? And when you think about that, there's a massive gap between these two entities, and these two entities are what make the local ecosystem. Get them talking locally, and they can create local opportunities. So I thought about all of that, and we created this platform. It's going to be free for all startups, so you're going to have a fantastic time playing around with it. It will be launched in the next couple of weeks, early December. It's called Alice Dot because it's Alice.ly. L-I, okay? It's in the logo. But anyway, but what I want you to think about as a takeaway from this and as we move on to the Q&A is the worst outcome of this moment is better than what 99% of the world live through every day. So at TEDx Athens, on my way to the airport, I was with this guy. And this guy, he skied from the coast to the South Pole and back, 89 days, Australian guy, crazy, okay? 89 days, unsupported. Unsupported means that you're carrying all your shit with you all the way there and back. There's no pit stop, there's no cafe along the way, you know, it's the South Pole. And you're skiing in -40 degrees weather, and you're consuming what you're carrying, that's it. This guy lost 27 kilograms in those 3 months, okay? Successfully made it. And so for me, he's a good measure of what this world can go through in terms of extremeness, the extreme will, the will to be able to go on and do not call in an airdrop. And I'm sitting there, and we're sitting in the cab, and we're going to the airport, and obviously everything, you know, was a bit of a mess because it was a massive event that had, you know, when things get big, sometimes things happen. So we're going to the airport, and the guy who's driving us misses the exit for the departure. And I was already 10 minutes into the boarding time of my flight because it took us too long to get there. He misses the departure, and I start freaking out a little, and I'm like, did we just miss it? And he's like, yeah. And he starts trying to go around, and I'm looking at the watch. And the guy up front goes into this nervous breakdown. He's like, dude, you know, we're going to have to figure it out. And I'm sorry about this, and so on. And he's not even an organizer. He was just one of the speakers at TEDx Athens. And I lean over, and I'm like, dude, the worst outcome of this moment, of missing that flight, okay, can't possibly be anything remotely relevant to 99% of the world and what they're going through. So there's no reason to, I mean, worst case scenario, get another flight. Imagine that's your worst case scenario. So each and every one of you, and this is the beauty of being an entrepreneur, each and every one of you, your worst case scenario is getting a job. Okay. Fuck, man. I'm gonna get employed. So if that's your worst case scenario, I don't know what to say, you know? Go out and do whatever you have to do, because everyone else on this planet has much bigger problems. Our only problem is we want to make a difference and we want to change the world. And as long as we believe that we are lucky for that to be our worst case scenario, that job stops being relevant. So that's my story. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay, the mic is here. Sure.
Congratulations on what you have done in Lebanon. My questions are, there are 2 questions. One is really short. How do you convince the government, like a little bit more details, to make that 400 million fund? And is this fund only for Lebanese startups?
Okay. The first one is another rhetorical question, but I would imagine some of you have been employed before, okay? And the success to employment is not who you're managing, but who's managing you, as in managing up, okay? So the concept of managing up is, as long as your boss is happy, it doesn't matter how bad you do. Because if the boss is happy, you're managing his expectations, and if you're managing his or her expectations, then you will be able to progress and succeed and so on. Now, of course, you have to do some work, but that's irrelevant. So if you're asking me how do I get the government to do something for me, that's the wrong question. The question is, how do I get the government to believe that